The old man, Harold Denton, woke up before dawn as he always did. The house creaked the way old houses in cold states do, stretching their wooden joints before the sun touches them. He shuffled into his slippers, wrapped the quilted robe around his narrow shoulders, and made his way toward the front window. Outside, the world was swallowed in winter. Snow stacked heavy on rooftops, swallowed fences, softened every angle into a white blur. Except for the driveway. Again, perfectly clear. Not a single footprint, no tire tracks, not even the uneven scrape marks a normal shovel would leave. Just smooth, clean concrete, like a sheet of glass. Harold frowned the same way he had every morning for the past 2 weeks. He lived alone. He didn't hire anyone. His nearest neighbor kept to himself and barely waved, and Harold himself was too old and arthritic to touch a shovel if his life depended on it. "Not again," he muttered, tapping the window, as if the driveway cared. He glanced up at the newly installed security camera above the porch. His daughter insisted he put it in after he had slipped on black ice last winter. He didn't want it. Too modern, too nosy. But now he was grateful, because whoever was clearing his driveway, it wasn't human kindness. It felt more like a pattern, a ritual. That afternoon, after his oatmeal and afternoon news, Harold sat down at the computer and pulled up the previous night's footage. Snow fell heavily between midnight and 3 a.m., thick, drifting sheets. At 2:46, motion was detected. A figure entered the frame. Harold leaned in until his breath fogged the screen. It wore a long, heavy winter coat, dark as the tree line, with the hood pulled so far forward the head looked faceless. No features, no shadows, just smooth white where a face should have been, like someone had cut it out of the world entirely. In its hands, a snow shovel. But when it swung, snow didn't fly to the sides. It didn't fall at all. The snow vanished, pulled into the shovel as if the tool were drinking it. The figure moved oddly, not slow, not fast, just deliberate. Each step left no imprint. Its coat didn't flutter in the wind. The snowfall didn't touch it. At the end of the video, the figure paused at the edge of the driveway. Slowly, it turned toward the camera. Harold's knuckles went white, because when the hood faced the lens directly, the screen flickered as though something inside the face, something unseen, was staring back. Then the footage cut to static, and out on that driveway, the snow had vanished again. Harold sat frozen, his breath shallow. Whatever was clearing his driveway wasn't helping him. It was coming closer every night. Snow kept falling in slow, heavy curtains the next morning, but again the driveway lay perfectly bare, like the world had been erased in one narrow path leading straight to Harold's porch. He stood there staring too long, until the cold bit through his slippers. Something in that clean strip felt expectant. By noon, he forced himself outside, tugging his coat tight as he crossed the empty yard to the house next door. The neighbor, Mr. Colby, rarely left home except to collect mail. Rumors said he'd lived there since the 70s, which was exactly when the previous owner of Harold's house vanished. Harold knocked. Silence. He tried again, louder. "Colby, I know you're in there. I just want to talk." Shuffling sounded behind the door, then a slow slide of metal, the chain latch staying firmly in place. Half an inch of the old man's face appeared. "You saw it, didn't you?" Colby rasped. Harold's breath caught. "So you do know something?" "No," Colby whispered sharply. "I know enough." His eye darted toward Harold's driveway as though afraid it might hear. "You shouldn't have filmed it." "I didn't ask for help, but something's clearing my path every night and I need answers." Colby shook his head. "It's not helping, it's marking." A chill that had nothing to do with winter crawled up Harold's spine.
Marking for what? For collection, Colby swallowed, Adam's apple trembling. When the snow gets too heavy, it comes, picks the warmest house on the street, cleans a path so it can— He cut himself off, lips clamping shut. So it can what, Colby? Harold demanded. The neighbor's eyes softened, almost pitying. You should have let the snow be. Once it chooses a door, it doesn't stop until— A thud echoed inside the house, deep, muffled, like someone dropping something heavy. Colby flinched violently. I can't talk to you. I can't be seen talking to you. He shut the door. The chain rattled back into place. Harold stood frozen on the porch, the cold sinking into his joints. As he turned to head home, he noticed something he hadn't before. Along his own walkway, where the snow ended, faint depressions trailed away, shallow, weightless footprints, not human, not animal, just impressions, like someone walking without touching the ground fully, yet somehow leaving an echo of their steps. They led straight to Harold's porch and stopped there.
Harold didn't sleep that night. He lay in his recliner with the curtains cracked open just enough to watch the driveway. Snow drifted down in soft spirals, the kind that usually muffled the world into a peaceful hush. But tonight, it only made the silence feel deeper, like something was listening. Around 3 a.m., the motion alert chimed. Harold's heart nearly kicked out of his chest. He fumbled for the remote and opened the camera feed. Nothing, just snow falling. Then, movement at the edge of the frame, not the figure, not the coat, a shape in the snow itself. The drifts rippled, sinking inward with each invisible step, like a pair of feet pressing down from above, but leaving no body to cast a shadow. The prints stopped exactly where the walkway met the driveway, the same place Harold had seen earlier, the place the figure always finished its work. And then the snow rose, like something was stepping upward, climbing air, leaving no print at all. Harold slammed the curtains shut. He didn't want to see more. By morning, exhaustion pulled at him like wet clothes, but he forced himself outside. He had to inspect the walkway again, to make sure he hadn't imagined the strange indentations. Except now, there were none. No prints, no traces of movement. The walkway was clean as polished stone. But as he approached the end of the drive, he noticed something else, something worse. A line had been drawn in the snow, a perfectly straight line stretching across the yard, as if someone had dragged a thin stick or a finger through the fresh powder. It curved gently around the side of the house, disappearing behind it. Harold followed it, each step louder than the last in his ears. When he reached the back corner, he stopped so fast his knees screamed. The line ended at his basement window, a basement window that was now open, just an inch, but open. Snow hadn't blown inside. Instead, the sill was perfectly dry, untouched, as if something had opened it from within, or pressed its face against the gap and inhaled every flake that tried to fall. Harold backed away slowly, eyes locked on the bark slit of the window. He didn't remember the last time he'd even used the basement. He didn't want to remember. Ever since he'd moved in, something about that place felt wrong, like the air was too heavy, too old, like it didn't want him there. But something else had been inside before him, and maybe hadn't left. A sudden gust lifted a swirl of snow into the air. Harold flinched, because in that swirl, for the briefest, impossible moment, he saw the outline of a hooded head, white-faced, leaning close, watching. He stumbled backward, hitting the siding of his house. The snow settled, the shape vanished, but the open basement window stayed exactly the same, quiet,
patient, waiting.
For the rest of the day, Harold avoided the basement window as if it were a mouth that might speak if he got too close. He kept every curtain shut, every light on, and every thought small and manageable, like he could corral his fear into a corner. But as evening fell, the quiet in the house turned heavier, thicker. The furnace hummed low, the clock ticked too loud, and somewhere behind the walls a faint crackling sound drifted through the vents, like ice shifting under pressure. Harold tried the TV. The static buzzed, then flickered to a black screen. He tried the radio. Only a low hum answered, vibrating like a distant engine underwater. By midnight, he couldn't pretend anymore. The house felt watched. So he sat at the kitchen table with a blanket draped over his shoulders, facing the back door. The security camera app glowed on his phone. Snow was falling again, thick and soundless. And just like every night, the driveway was already clean, although he hadn't seen the figure arrive. Then a new alert chimed. Backyard camera, motion detected. Harold's hand shook as he tapped the notification. At first, nothing. Then, movement near the tree line. Not the coat, not the figure. The shovel, suspended in midair. It floated forward, blade down, cutting through the snow without scattering a single flake. Snowbanks didn't fall away. They collapsed inward, pulled toward the metal, as though the shovel were swallowing them whole. The wood handle trembled slightly, like something invisible gripped it too tightly. And then Harold heard it. A faint sound through the phone speaker, a rasp like two stones grinding underwater. At first he thought it was interference. Then the sound shifted, forming a rhythm, a scraping murmur that curled through his gut. Old. Or maybe he only imagined the shape of his own name inside the noise. The shovel stopped abruptly, turned, pointed toward the house like an accusing finger made of steel. Harold dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor. At that exact moment, every light in the house blinked out. The darkness came down fast and absolute. Harold froze, heart pounding like fists on a coffin lid. For a second, all he heard was his own breathing. Then, the basement door, locked for years, creaked. Not open, not shut, just breathed. A long, slow exhale of wood against old hinges. Harold backed toward the hallway, afraid to turn his back on the sound. A soft tap echoed from downstairs, then another, a rhythm, footsteps with no weight, and beneath them the faintest metallic scrape, as if the shovel had found the basement steps. Harold stumbled backward, hitting the wall. The door stopped creaking. The house held its breath. And then, through the heater vent near the floor, a whisper slid into the room, soft and icy and unmistakably directed at him. Chosen. Harold didn't move for what felt like a full minute. The word, chosen, still clung to the air, thin and cold as spider silk. He pressed his hand against the wall to steady himself, but the paint felt strangely chilled, as if the temperature inside the house had dropped without warning. Then he noticed his breath. He could see it, a pale cloud each time he exhaled. Snow began to fall, inside the hallway. Just a few flakes at first, drifting lazily down from nowhere, dissolving before they reached the floor. Then more, a thin, unnatural flurry hanging in the air, like the house had forgotten which side of the walls winter belonged to. Harold backed up until his calves hit the side table. The entire time, the basement door remained still, but the cold coming from behind it crept outward like fingers testing the air. He forced himself to speak, voice trembling. "Leave me alone, whatever you are." The house answered with a soft crunch, like someone stepping on fresh snow.
but the sound came from the living room, not the basement. Harold swallowed hard. He turned slowly. Thin trails of frost stretched across the carpet, delicate as veins under skin. They formed branching lines from the window toward the interior of the house, stopping a few feet from where Harold stood. As he watched, one line extended further, creeping toward him like a growing root. "No, no, no, no," his voice cracked. He took a step back. The frost followed. Harold staggered toward the kitchen, searching for anything, salt, heat, a weapon. But the moment he reached the tile floor, the snowflakes inside the house swirled toward the ceiling like they were being pulled upward. Then they stopped mid-air, suspended. And slowly they began shaping themselves. Not a full figure, not yet, but the outline of a hood, forming from frozen particles, shimmering faintly under the weak kitchen light. Harold's chest tightened. He reached for the drawer where he kept old tools, but before he could touch it, the snow hood tilted, watching him, acknowledging him. Another whisper drifted through the vent, this time not a word, but a sound like icy wind passing through hollow metal. Shh. Krrr. The whisper deepened, curling through the house until the cupboards rattled. The air grew sharper, colder, almost painful in his lungs. Then the snow shape collapsed without warning, falling to the floor in a soft sigh. Silence returned, heavy, waiting. Harold's heart hammered, expecting something worse, something final. But nothing else happened. The frost stopped creeping, the air stopped tightening, and from the basement, the faint click of something metal tapping against concrete echoed once, like a shovel leaning itself upright after finishing a task. Not leaving, not retreating, just waiting for the next command. Harold barely slept. Every creak of the house sounded like the shovel tapping again. Every draft felt like the frozen breath of something standing just out of sight. By morning, his nerves were frayed thin as paper. He was sitting at the kitchen table, clutching a mug of cold coffee he'd forgotten to drink, when headlights splashed across the snow outside. Tires crunched. A car door slammed. Then a familiar voice cut through the quiet. "Dad? You home?" Harold's chest tightened. Emily. His daughter stepped inside, stamping snow off her boots. She looked annoyed, tired, and completely unaware of the danger she had just walked into. "I've been calling all night," she said. "When you didn't answer, I drove over. You look awful. What's going on?" Harold's voice came out thin. "You shouldn't be here." Emily frowned. "Dad, come on. I know you get weird about your health, but it's not my health. There's something in the house." She laughed softly, the way people do when they think someone's being dramatic. "What, raccoons? You live in the middle of a forest, Dad." "No, not raccoons." He glanced toward the basement door. Something else, something that comes at night. Emily followed his gaze, eyebrows knitting. "Did you call someone? What's actually going on?" Harold opened his mouth to answer, but a sudden thump echoed through the floorboards. Not loud, just unmistakable. Emily jumped. "What was that?" Harold stood so quickly his chair screeched backward. "Emily, we need to go right now. We need to leave the house, please." But before she could respond, the furnace kicked on with a harsh metallic groan, far too loud, far too strained. The vents rattled. A cold draft rolled through the kitchen, even though the heat should have been blowing. Then came the whisper, not through the vents this time, from the basement door. A slow, scraping exhale. Emily froze. Her eyes widened, confusion turning into something closer to fear. "Dad? What was that?" Harold grabbed her arm. "We're leaving." They moved toward the front door, but as Emily reached for the handle, a sudden blast of icy air hit them. The snow on the porch lifted, swirling upward into a funnel that pressed itself against the doorframe, as if something outside was trying to push its way in. Emily staggered back. "What the hell?" The basement door creaked behind them, very slowly, a steady crack widening, as if a hand, or something like a hand, were pushing it open from below. Harold seized Emily's wrist. "Don't look at it. Don't turn around." But she did. Of course she did. The basement door stood open just 3 inches, no more. But from that darkness, a thin line of frost stretched across the floor toward their feet, growing inch by inch like a living root. Emily whispered, "Dad, it's coming upstairs." Harold's throat closed. "We have to run." But when they turned toward the front door again, the swirling snow outside abruptly stopped, falling straight to the ground as if something had just stepped away from it. The porch was empty, and the silence that followed was somehow worse. Emily's breath trembled. "Dad, what is this?" Harold didn't answer, because behind them the basement door clicked, not closing, not opening, just locking them in.
The lock's click echoed through the hallway with a finality that made both Harold and Emily freeze. Not loud, almost gentle, but unmistakably deliberate, as if the house itself had decided they weren't going anywhere. Emily tried the front door again, twisting the handle with both hands. "It's stuck! Dad, it's actually stuck!" Harold didn't need to touch it. He already knew. Whatever had marked him, whatever had chosen him, wasn't going to let his daughter walk away so easily. "Emily," he said quietly, "step back from the door." She turned toward him, eyes frantic. "What's happening? What did you do?" He didn't answer, because the real answer wasn't something he'd done. It was something he'd inherited the moment he'd moved into the house. A soft crackling sound rose beneath their feet, like ice forming across a frozen lake. Emily looked down. The frost from the basement had spread faster, now crawling up the baseboards, threading across the wallpaper, creeping in delicate patterns like skeletal vines. The temperature dropped so sharply that Emily's breath puffed visibly. "We need to get out through a window," she said, voice shaking. "We break the glass, we climb out, we leave. I don't care what's happening, we are not staying here." Harold nodded. "Living room. Those windows aren't sealed shut." They moved quickly. Emily reached the curtains first and yanked them open, and screamed. Not because something was outside, but because the entire pane of glass was opaque with frost, thick and white, as if winter had clenched its fist around the house. Shapes shifted behind it, shadows moving just out of sight, brushing against the outer wall. One passed close enough that its outline blurred through the frost, like a distorted face pressing forward. Emily stumbled back. "It's watching us." "It's watching me," Harold corrected quietly. Before Emily could respond, a heavy thud shook the floorboards, deep and resonant, coming from directly beneath them. The basement. Then another thud, and another. A slow, steady rhythm like footsteps climbing the staircase, one deliberate step at a time. Emily grabbed Harold's arm. "Dad, please tell me what's down there." He wanted to. God, he wanted to. But how do you explain a thing that wasn't alive, wasn't dead, wasn't even earthly? He took a shaky breath. "Whatever it is, it's been here longer than we have, and it doesn't want you involved." Emily's eyes brimmed with horror. Too late. The basement door handle began to turn. Not smoothly, not like a human hand turning metal, but in short, sharp movements, jerking left and right, as if something was testing the mechanics of the lock, learning the way it worked. The door shuddered. A crack formed in the wood. A breath of icy air poured through it, sliding across the floor toward them. Emily clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle a cry. "Upstairs," whispered Harold. "Now!" They hurried toward the staircase, but halfway up, Harold stopped. Emily turned back, fear flashing into anger. "Dad, move!" But Harold couldn't, because from the top landing, drifting like a sheet of fresh snowfall, came a single white flake. Not melting, not drifting randomly. It moved with purpose, as if someone or something stood on the second floor just out of view, exhaling winter into the hallway. Emily followed his gaze.
Her voice dropped to a trembling whisper. "It's not just in the basement, is it?" Harold shook his head, because now the house wasn't just cold, it was breathing. One exhale from below, one exhale from above, trapping them in the middle.
The house exhaled again, this time louder. A hollow, icy groan rolled through the walls, carrying with it the unmistakable scrape of metal dragging across concrete. The shovel. It was moving somewhere below them. Emily gripped the banister. "Dad, we're trapped!" Harold forced himself to breathe. Panic would get them killed faster than the thing hunting them. "We go upstairs," he said, "room by room. Barricade ourselves until sunrise. It only moves freely at night." At least, he hoped that was true. They climbed, each step creaking under their weight. Halfway up, the temperature dropped so sharply that the banister rhymed over right under Emily's palm. She jerked her hand away. The upstairs hallway was dim, the overhead light flickering like a dying pulse. Frost crawled along the ceiling in branching patterns that twisted toward the bedrooms. Emily swallowed hard. "Which room?" "Mine," Harold whispered. "The lock's from the inside." He didn't mention the real reason. It was the only room where he'd never sensed the presence. The creature avoided it, circled around it, as if the room itself repelled it. Or as if it were saving that room for last. They reached the doorway. Emily pushed inside and gasped. Snow covered the floor. Not a deep layer, just a thin, even sheet, perfectly smooth, untouched. It wasn't there that morning. It couldn't have blown in. The windows were sealed, the walls intact. Harold stepped forward. His foot broke the pristine surface, and that's when he saw it. A symbol, drawn beneath the snow, revealed only when disturbed. A looping spiral with jagged branches extending from it, almost like the frost patterns downstairs, but arranged purposefully. It looked less like art and more like a warning. Or a claim. Emily knelt slowly. "Dad, is that—" "A mark," he finished. "I think it's marking where it intends to take me." Emily shot to her feet. "No, no, I'm not letting this thing take you. We're breaking a window and climbing out if we have to." "We already saw what it does to windows." Emily opened her mouth, but froze. A sound rose from below. A dragging, rhythmic scrape. Shk, shk, shk. The shovel climbing the basement stairs. Harold's stomach dropped. "It hurt us." Emily grabbed the dresser. "Help me block the door." They shoved the heavy furniture against the frame just as the first impact hit, a sharp, violent crack that shook the entire door. Frost blossomed instantly along the bottom edge, reaching inward like searching fingers. Another blow. Then another. The door splintered. Emily screamed. Harold pulled her back just as the lights blew out with a hollow pop, plunging the room into darkness. But in the dark, they could still see it. A glow. Pale, white, unnatural. Seeping through the cracks in the door like moonlight pressed through bone. Emily clung to Harold, trembling. "Dad, what does it want?" Harold closed his eyes. He remembered the driveway, the perfect path, the way the figure paused at the end, turning toward the camera like it knew it was being watched. It's preparing a replacement, preparing a path for someone new. Emily's grip tightened. "Why you?" Because he lived in the wrong house, because he saw what he wasn't supposed to see, because it chose him. Harold didn't answer. The door gave one final booming crack, splitting down the center. The glowing white seeped through, widening, brightening, and then, without warning, everything stopped. The cold retreated. The glow dimmed. The creature froze mid-approach, as if something had changed. Something
Outside. Harold stepped forward, heart pounding. Emily whispered, What's it doing?" He listened. Below them, faint and distant, a car engine approached. Headlights swept across the frost-covered windows. Another visitor, another potential choice. The creature withdrew, slow and silent, melting back into the shadows. Emily exhaled shakily. "Dad, it's leaving." Harold stared at the broken door, the fading glow, the stillness. "No," he whispered, "it's not leaving." He looked at Emily. "It's deciding."
The headlights swept across the upstairs walls, pale beams flashing through the frost-blurred windows. Emily held her breath. Harold didn't move. The creature's retreat had left the house unnaturally still, as if everything inside were holding itself tight, waiting. A car door slammed outside. Then footsteps crunched steadily up the walkway. Harold's stomach dropped. "It's the mailman," he whispered. "He always checks on me when my box overfills." Emily's eyes widened with horror. "Dad, we have to warn him." But as she stepped toward the shattered bedroom door, a sudden blast of icy air surged through the hallway, sweeping past them like an invisible tide. The lights flickered, not on, but brighter, pulsing faintly with a white glow like the one that seeped from the creature. Emily staggered back. "What is it doing?" Harold knew. The creature had paused, not because it lost interest, but because it sensed someone new approaching the threshold, someone unmarked, someone who could take Harold's place. Outside, the footsteps stopped. "Mr. Denton? You all right in there? It's freezing out here." The creature responded instantly. From the basement, faint but unmistakable, came the rhythmic scrape. Shh-k, 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 climbing again, heading for the front of the house. "No, no, no," Emily gasped. "We have to stop him." But the moment they reached the stairs, the frost thickened, sealing the top step with a slick white crust. The house itself seemed to shift, tilting subtly, pressing inward like a lung holding breath. The creature didn't want them interfering. A faint shadow darkened the frosted front window. The mailman, just standing there, too still. Harold's voice cracked. "Don't open the door! Get away from it!" But the man didn't move. Emily grabbed Harold's arm. "Dad, look!" A pale shape had formed behind the mailman, tall, hooded, white-faced. The shovel hovered inches above the snow, swallowing flakes before they touched the ground. The creature raised its head. The mailman turned, slowly, as though pulled. A soft whisper rolled through the house. "Chosen." But it wasn't directed at Harold this time. Emily's nails dug into his sleeve. "Dad, it picked him." The creature extended one arm, or something like an arm, toward the mailman's chest. Snow curled around them in a spiral, lifting from the ground like a slow, silent vortex. The man's expression froze, neither fear nor surprise, just blank stillness, as if thought itself had been pulled from him. Then the porch light flickered. The creature paused. It lowered its arm. The snow spiral collapsed. The mailman blinked, dazed, unaware he'd hovered inches from oblivion. And then the whisper returned, drifting through every vent, every crack. "Already marked." Emily turned to Harold. "It still wants you."
The whisper, already marked, hung in the frozen air like a verdict. Harold felt it settle into his bones, a pull, a summons, a final claim. Outside, the mailman shivered, rubbed his temples, then trudged back toward his truck, never noticing the hooded figure standing inches behind him, watching with hollow patience.
The creature never touched him again. It only waited for Harold. Emily grabbed her father's shoulders, shaking him. "No, no, Dad, you're not going anywhere. We're leaving this house. We're burning it down if we have to." But Harold could feel something shifting inside him, an old weight lifting, a cold clarity settling in. The mark on his bedroom floor had not chosen him by mistake. The clear driveway, the open basement window, the glowing cracks. It had been preparing him. And now the house, the frost, the breath, everything was leaning gently toward the front door, like a path being swept clean, for him alone. He stepped away from Emily. "Dad, stop!" she cried. The floor under Harold's feet warmed slightly, just enough to guide him forward. Emily lunged to block him, but a sudden blast of icy air shoved the door behind them shut, cutting her off from the staircase. Frost webbed across the wood in an instant. "No!" she pounded on the door from the other side. "Dad, please!" But Harold kept walking. The front hallway brightened with a dim, pale glow. The frost receded from the front door, not melting, just moving aside, inviting him to the threshold. Outside, the hooded figure stood waiting. Snow swirled around it, but never touched it, sucked silently into its shovel like breath into lungs. Harold paused with his hand on the doorknob. The creature lifted its head. Under the hood, the white face rippled, like snow beginning to form features. His features. Harold inhaled sharply. The creature wasn't just taking him. It was becoming him. That was the replacement. That was the exchange. One warm body for one winter-bound shadow. Behind him, Emily screamed his name. Harold closed his eyes. Then he turned, not toward the creature, but toward the hallway behind him, and stepped back inside. The creature froze. The house shuddered. Harold whispered, "Take me, but she goes free." The air tightened. Snow on the porch lifted in a silent whirl. The creature tilted its head, considering, its face collapsing back into blank white. Then came the whisper, "Accepted." The front door blew open in a violent gust. Wind and snow ripped through the house, knocking Harold to his knees. Emily's voice echoed faintly from behind the frozen door. "Dad!" Harold didn't resist as the cold swept over him, didn't fight as his limbs numbed, didn't cry out as his breath crystallized. The creature stepped forward, lowering her shovel, not to harm him, to hand it to him. The instant he touched the handle, the world whitened. The aftermath. 3 days later, neighbors reported that Harold's house was empty. No signs of struggle, no footprints, just an immaculate driveway, perfectly cleared every snowfall. Emily returned with police. They found only Harold's slippers by the front door. But that night, when the snow began again, the officers witnessed something they never spoke of publicly. A tall figure in a heavy winter coat, a white, shifting face, a shovel that swallowed snow with every stroke. And beside it, just for a moment, another figure standing at a distance, shorter, slimmer, watching the house with unmistakable human sadness. Emily swore the second figure looked like her father, but when she blinked, it was gone. Only the perfect path remained.